Hey everyone, Brian Beeler coming to you from the Storage View Lab alongside Kevin. No, not alongside Kevin O'Brien. Today I'm alongside a pile of HP gear ranging from workstations to thin clients to mini workstations and even this little two-in-one Dragonfly fella up there. And the reason why I've piled all of this gear together is mostly because Kevin's not here and I need something to sit next to. But also because we want to do the technical walkthrough of a project we've been working on. We've talked about it on the podcast, this concept around HP's remote workforce solution called ZCentral Remote Boost. To help me have that conversation today, I've brought in a couple friends. Tom Fenton is here with us. Tom, how you doing, bud?
Doing good, thanks.
Why don't you start out by giving us your view on VDI versus remote desktop access for more professional use cases? I know you've got a fancy term you like to coin or have coined, perhaps.
to bandy around, I didn't coin it, but I definitely am learning to love and embrace it. It's called HDI, Hosted Desktop Infrastructure, versus VDI, which is Virtual Desktop Infrastructure. With hosted desktop infrastructure, you go ahead and use existing physical machines rather than virtual machines, and this gives you a couple advantages. In the current situation, probably the biggest advantage is that you don't have to set up a virtual infrastructure in order to use the resources that you already have. And second is you don't share any of those resources. So if you're doing some heavy-duty CAD CAM work, that great M&E stuff that more and more people are using remotely, you can use the entire system, the entire computer, versus having to share it and having the noisy neighbor problem and things like that. And the timing for this article couldn't have been better as we delved into this mess of working from home and having to get instant access. We had, a week notice before they shut everything down. So HP, their timing on this was just fantastic.
Yeah, and to that, I'll bring in Cliff Robin with HP now. Cliff, you've got, Jiminy Christmas, 18 or 20 HP systems set up behind you, so you're living the virtual Vita Loca, it looks like. Tell us a little bit more about the solution, and to Tom's point, you guys cranked this out a little sooner than you wanted to initially, but you've got some great momentum, a lot of great things going on. What's the latest there?
Right. Well, just interesting, Tom's comment about, the week notice. The record that I'm aware of for somebody using Remote Boost and getting set up for production pipeline turnaround is 20 hours, where there was over in Europe, it's out there on the web. There's a podcast where they talk about that and how they're able to get all their folks back up. Small boutique M&E video house, but it was amazing what they were able to do. In this environment, it's something that we've been aggressively working with our customers on and gathering features, and what they need has completely changed our roadmap and direction for the next year as we try to react to the situation and provide the features that are most needed for folks to work from home in an enterprise or small, medium business environment.
Right. And speaking of roadmap, you're going to give us a little bit of slide here, but I promise our viewers that you're going to give us some good information too, including a little bit of a sneak peek at features that'll be released later this fall. So let's take a look at that.
Absolutely. And then the rest of the time, we'll do the demo. That'll be fun. All right. So really, this is kind of a recap website article and some of what we've talked about on the podcast, but I just want to be clear for what we're going to be showing. It's really about the end-to-end solution. So we have endpoint devices, the things you have at home, compute resources, the things that may be at campus, and our point-to-point, which we'll spend most of the time on, our HP ZCentral Connect Remote Boost, is what allows this to happen. The yellow line represents typically a firewall. So we are an infrastructure overlay, and what that typically means is that we are using your existing network for whether a VPN or AD for the access control. we're letting you control that, and we're just laying on the top of it. And then HP ZCentral Connect, and we'll get into this, is like sort of like the librarian that lets things check things in and out for people who are looking for compute resources, and compute resources are looking for people to use them. It's an introductory service, and then it gets out of the way and makes things happen. Does that make sense, Tom?
Yeah, absolutely. And kind of one of the key points is you don't need to use the Connect unless you want to, right? I mean, you don't even need to stand that up in order to get up and going.
So it Connect's a superset product, if you will, for our suite. So HP ZCentral Remote Boost is license free with our Z hardware since 2011, ZBooks or workstations. If somebody happens to have one of that, go to our website, download it, it'll work. And then, of course, more than half of our user base is a paid for license. This is just kind of a high-level overview of the different things that we're going to talk about today. The dynamic resizing, graphics, hardware acceleration, and the multiple OS support mostly just speak to because it works. It's Windows and Mac's OS and Linux on the receiver side, and then it's on the sender side, it is Windows and Linux.
Yeah, and like you said, free if you got the Z workstation. I mean, it's there. It's free for Z.
Yep.
Z.
Yep. And we also have 60-day trials. So if somebody wants to try it out for whether it's Connect or Remote Boost, just go to our website. Again, it's prominent on the main page, and you're welcome to 60 days. The time is limited, not the number of connections or number of machines you can use it for. So we really make it simple for people to try it out. One of the things we're really excited about showing, and this will be in our October release toward the end of the month, is our new Wacom tablet support. So we've always had it a little bit Linux to Linux, and Wacom is about pressure sensitivity. So that's the big thing. It's always worked as a super mouse, if you will, but people buy these things, whether they're Intellis Pro or Cintiq or something else, so that they can do the inking that you see here. The artist can actually have the digital inking experience, and especially in animation and Photoshop and some other 2D things, it's really critical, and we need those people to be able to work from home. So we've been able to enable Windows to Windows and Mac to Windows and Mac to Linux, so that and a couple other flavors of that. Point being, we're working very closely with Wacom as a partner and trying to provide the best experience out there. So, of course, from your perspective, it's latency free. And you being a user, if you happen to be an artist, you want it. You don't want to have that eye, and that's the disconnect in all this. You move the mouse, you move the pin. If your eye's like, I can see the lag, it takes you out of the moment. And everything we do and everything we strive for is to not take anybody out of their compute moment, if you will.
Okay, so this means that the same experiences they would as if they were forced to go into the office, correct?
Pretty darn close, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Pretty close, as much as we can technically make it. We mentioned ZCentral Connect, and as I said, it's about having a pool of workstations or library books, reference books that you can get to and check out, and then easily grab them. The librarian checks them out to you, and then bring them back when we need to check them back in. One of the other things is this remote power control, and that's really critical for being able to power the machines up or down. And this is something with vPro that we provide. So most of our workstations come with vPro, and other people's equipment do too. And if you choose to provision that in your environment, you actually have hard power control, just like the button if it was sitting next to you.
Right, and if you have a rack of these physical workstations, I mean, that's quite a power savings to be able to power them down overnight or when they're not in use, and then bring them back up on demand.
Absolutely. And if we want, at the end of this, I can, we announced our product, our 1U workstation that's also going to release in October. We can take a quick look at it, but what's interesting is this is kind of the first time that from a workstation point of view, we're actually integrating the hardware and the software to work better together. So within that, these are the new features that ZCentral Connect will support specifically for our 1U racked workstation. We have an LED control light on the front and the back, which seems like a small thing, but the admin from the Z Connect display, the console that we'll look here in a second, can turn it on and off. And that way, if you need to replace something like a hard drive or memory, you can let somebody know who's actually in the data center which machine to get to.
Yeah, and let me back. We're talking about working from home and how this is great from work from home. But also, if you're in the office, if you're physically thing, you probably want these servers in a secure location, not only because of the heat they produce, but also just have things locked up so they don't walk out or they don't get coffee spilt on them, right?
Yeah, or redundant power supplies. Redundant power supplies.
Yep.
And that's the biggest feature that's kind of new for what we're doing with our racked workstations, that they come with redundant power supplies. And what's cool about that is, because it's a workstation, there's also an expectation that you're going to work with a high-end graphics card. And of course, those double wide full length have a very high wattage requirement off the power supply. So if you take, we've got two separate power supplies. If you put them together, this is something you do in software, and say, use them together. Now you get them end-to-end serial, if you will, and you have 1,300 watts of power in this 1U rack, which is insane. But if you want the redundancy, it's 650 each, and then we have the ability to notify the ZCentral Connect admin, hey, the power supplies are good, or there's a problem. And this is also something that works with the vPro technology. So this really kind of encompasses the start of some of our management features.
Great. I got to say that of all the stuff I've got on the desk, that's all great, but a stack of those rack mount Z4s, when they're ready, they will definitely need to be coming in here and replacing our set of gear.
Well, and personally, take one apart. It's beautiful. I love erector sets growing up, and it's not an erector set. It's more like one of those cool snap together kits that no tools needed. You just flip it open, do what you need, flip it back, and it's all got hinges. And it's, if you've ever taken apart one of our workstations, it's along the same idea, toolless.
Yeah, I noticed that. I did a review on the T740, and it just came apart so easily and so elegantly that it was something that really kind of impressed me. You didn't need screwdrivers or anything like that. So I think that runs through the HP line.
Yeah, and it's part of our DNA. It's kind of funny. You can't really use that to say, hey, look at HP and also take apart your competitor, whoever else you're looking at, for ease of maintenance. And it's something that we just take pride in. We spend the extra money, the extra time to give you that experience on all of our products.
Yeah, definitely. Beats taking an angle grinder with a cutoff disc to it.
Very true. So, any questions on this, Tom?
Let's get to work on the demo.
Hey, no, let's do demos. Yeah.
Okay. So,
we do like our demos, don't we, Brian?
We do.
So this is actually my new picture of a bunch of racked Z4s. This is what they look like in a rack.
Those are the one used. Those are kind of sexy.
Oh, they're very nice. Like I said, and get a chance, I'll show you the. Actually, on the website is the one used, and they're beautiful. They've got an exploding 15-second video.
Real quick, Tom, before we get too far into this demo, and Cliff's getting it all set up here for us, just give us a highlight on what it was from the software side that stood out to you when you were using this. Because what we did in our paper, which is on the site, and we'll link to it along with some links to Z resources in the description here on YouTube. But one of the things we did was set up some of these machines that are to my left, and we put the Z640s, the minis in there, and you were remotely connecting to them and actively using this in our lab in Cincinnati, all the way from wherever you are near the edge of the Northwest coast. But what stood out to you as you were going through that process?
Yeah, well, that's kind of interesting. Probably the biggest thing is how easy it was to set up. There wasn't there wasn't any infrastructure to set up. Usually I give myself, a couple weeks lead time to work out issues. But this one, man, I kicked this paper out in just record time because I didn't have to fool around with it. I first created a virtual desktop because they're easy to work with, and installed the agent on it, the sender on it, and just connected. Thought, wow, this is pretty slick. And then I used another brand physical desktop again, just installed the sender on it, just connected up, and then reached out to Kevin, and it took him a little while to set up a VPN. That's all we needed. And so I think I kicked out this paper in record time just because of the simplicity of it. And the quality of the experience was just great. I I mean, I couldn't tell whether it was going locally here or back to
Right.
to the Midwest, our Midwest lab. Just really was impressed with it.
Well, good. Let's hit some of that simplicity. So, Cliff, walk us through what you've got going on here, and let's work through this. And I know we're going to look at some of the collaboration tools as well, which I think is one of the neater things in terms of how this thing works. Tom hit one of my favorite things, and that's getting control over the PCs in the data center to be able to have security, physical backup, that sort of thing, and also increase utilization. So, as maybe people are shifting through their day, that you could spin up a new user on the same machine at night to get more utilization out of those expensive GPUs and that sort of thing. But the simplicity is a big deal too for the desktop administrator. So just give us a bit of a walkthrough here on what we're looking at.
And I like that term simplicity because there's two rules that we develop the software by, specifically is keep it simple and do no harm. And the do no harm I kind of mentioned as an infrastructure overlay, and we'll talk about that a little bit more with the remote boost and how it just uses frame buffers and is kind of below the driver level. The simplicity here is also reflected in the HP ZCentral Connect because there's more we can do and there's more we're going to do, but it's really about making it very simple for somebody to drop into their environment and have this ability to very quickly start managing machines without going through a number of gyrations to get that set up. To that end, I mentioned the library books, Tom. So these are all the different machines that I have in my little demo pool. These are the status of them. They're ready to go. Host names, owner types, all this basic thing. And if we have our vPro enabled, which all but one of these systems do, we get a bunch of auto population that our customers have asked for. And basically, while it seems minor, the fact that somebody can get the serial number off a system remotely is a really big deal to an admin. That was one of the low-hanging fruit, if you will, questions that we got was being able to be able to tell which machine a specific machine was and where it was. One of the things that's really neat, and I mentioned it before, is power control. So if I hit power on, power off, or reset, that's what's going to happen to those machines, just like I was standing next to them. So if it, reset, all these machines will immediately reboot. When Grace will shut down and restart, that's the normal Windows start and stop like you would do from the Windows icon. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's so elegant if you do have to shut down a rack or what have you. Just one click and you're done. Well, 3 clicks there, I guess. But yep.
Right. But we'll uncheck that so I don't actually do it any harm. And basically, you add or import hosts as needed from Active Directory. You can manually do it. One of the other things here, the owner names are either going to be pools or users, and I'll show you what that looks like. But this is, the admin can actually sort on all this stuff and find out things quickly. I only have 11 systems here, but obviously when you're in the hundreds, you need the ability to get around a little bit better. The pools are what I mentioned about for the library. So you basically have machines in a pool, and then either security groups or users, and these are Active Directory things. So it's basically saying these are compute resources, and they're all the same, so it doesn't matter who someone connects to, just like a reference books, they're all the same. And then these are the users. So these are the users that want to have compute resources, and these are the compute resources that are looking for users to be introduced to them.
And so if a resource isn't available, go on to the next one, correct?
Correct. Up until the point there aren't any, and then the user would still see in the pool name, but they would not. It wouldn't offer them anything. It'd be grayed out, just like you would intuitively, like you would expect.
Yeah. And so if you have shared storage on the back end and you're doing some rendering or M&E stuff, you don't really care what compute resource you're landing on, right?
Right. And, when you're dealing with large files, you're definitely looking at some kind of shared resource, when you're dealing a giga or terabytes and stuff. And then, for a lot of other smaller things, hundreds of megabytes, we found OneDrive is decent. for keeping things in sync, and the way you would normally do it with a shared resource in a given company.
Yeah. So I mean, literally, I know this isn't, well, maybe it is the case. So if you have someone who has a mixed workload, they spend some days doing some heavy GPU intensive stuff, and other days they're writing reports to their boss. They could literally just free up that workstation resource and let someone who gets more value from it and go to a lesser workstation or system, right?
Right, with the same intrinsic experience. A good example is, they have a Z8 for doing rendering or some work on, and if they were at work, it's underneath their desk, and they're also doing their email and everything else on it. But it's only really there because they're using, Maya or some given out, or maybe CATIA if it's an engineering firm. So that could be available for somebody else, shared files, shared resources, and when they needed to do their email, they did it locally on their machine, or they logged into, say, a Z2 Mini and did it that way out of a pool. You're right.
Yep. Yeah.
Private host is exactly what it sounds like. This machine was made private for me, and it basically means that it's out of the pool and nobody else can get to it. So, this is mine until the administrator decides it isn't. Security groups and users, that's imported from Active Directory. And then we've got a little bit of session information, and then all our help stuff is online. And I'm going to get us reset on this and delete our session so we can go through and start again. Does that make sense? Go through the user experience if you don't have any other questions.
No. And another kind of advantage of this is setting up a new user. All you have to do is add them to a couple groups, right? And they'll get the compute resource they need.
Right. So you would add them to they're in Active Directory, which you're going to have to do anyway.
Yep.
And in this case, I've gotten my username and password here. And you would have added them to some groups, and they're done. So you didn't have to image a machine. You didn't have to do anything special. You just added them to the pool, and they're good to go.
Do you support Active Directory groups, or does it just per user?
No, it's everything Active Directory does.
Okay, so you just add that user to the Active Directory group that they need. They're set up.
That's an interesting point about onboarding too, guys. Is that if you're in a M&E shop and you want to bring in an additional resource, a new hire or a temp worker to work on some specific component of it, they can access this from almost quite literally anything, including Macs, which you talked about before with the receiver, and have access to these powerful machines that are already in your data center, in your control, in your security, and that have access to the storage and other shared resources that may be on the network. The time to spin up a new employee, you didn't really highlight that, Cliff, but I think that's really an important component here.
And, it's really whatever makes sense in their environment. There's other ways, we can do it. I'm not, where it's a straight VDI instance for the email and things like that. But you can't get around when you hire talented people, high-end professionals, you've hired them because they're capable of doing certain things. And typically it's workstation class things that are eventually involve graphics and compute. Even in financial districts where it's not so much the specific compute, but a lot of screens, it works that way too. Instantly bring them up by just adding them to the group.
Yeah, that T740, it had it had a lot of HDMI ports on it, and it could, you could ship that out to someone and have them connect to data center, and you're up and running.
Yep. So let's take a look here, and to that onboarding part, as an admin, what I would have done is I would have said, hey, Cliff, here's this URL, connect to the company network, here's your username and password. When you log in and then click on choose a host and pick, normally you would see everything. If I click on my hosts, here's that private host I mentioned over here. Whoops, private host, you can see it there. And since I kind of run the part of the team that runs the pool, I get to see all the hosts or the groups here. But if I didn't have access to them, they would not be here. And if they were not available, they would be grayed out. Does that make sense? It's as simple as that. And then click on choose a host. And let's expand that out a teeny bit. And basically what happens here is it's going to give you some basic information. So now it said, hey, I chose this machine for you. I just checked to see the date and time when it checked if it was powered on. It just checked. Okay, great. It's okay. It's not off. It's not somebody else using it. and power operation, shut down and restore. So the user has, now you're down to 2 clicks, the ability to turn these machines on and off. So that gets around one of the biggest issues in enterprises. For the most part, somebody does something or installs software and the machine logs out or locks up, and the typical things is reboot, right? Well, you don't want to have to go on campus to do that. So whether it's under somebody's desk or racked in a rack, now you have the ability to do this without vPro provisioning.
Okay.
All right, so I'm going to connect, and what we're doing here is we're launching Remote Boost, and unfortunately it started on a different window, but this is what it looks like. So it's authenticating me in, making sure I have the right credentials. Again, so active ZCentral Connect is not controlling it's controlling whether or not it gets to show me a given machine for access, but it is not controlling whether or not I have access to this machine. If I had been not denied admin or access by the admin to a specific machine, I never would have gotten this far.
Okay, and the receiver part, that's just freely available. You can download it without any issues, and you don't have a charge for that as well.
That's correct, and thanks for bringing that up. So the licensing part is on the sender only. The receiver is available free and can be downloaded at any time. And in fact, let's get this started off. One of the things that I like to talk about, and it was mentioned earlier, was a collaboration mode. And let's get you in here to collaborate. And that's one of the nice things, if Tom was my boss, then if I was working on something specific, I could ask him, hey, come look at this. And I know he's sharing the same exact desktop experience as I am, because go ahead.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and connect in. You ready for me?
Yep.
Hey, are you ready, Minion?
Yeah, Tom, you got a promotion out of this deal.
Yes, boss. Yes, boss.
Yeah, I did. All right. Oh, there. Yeah, my other screen just popped up.
You got to come into the data center on Saturdays and Sundays.
So Tom,
too.
No, I'm your boss. I don't do
Tom,
that. You don't understand this boss thing, do you?
Walk through real quick, Tom, what you're doing here.
Brought up the receiver and put in an IP address, put in my username, bossman, and then I'm seeing the exact same screen. I see his mouse moving on there. How well does it handle like interactive 3D type applications? Can you bring one of those up?
Yeah, we can do that in just a second. Why don't you go ahead and bring it up?
Well, you could.
So I wanted to show that as part of the security. So normally I would have gotten a prompt that asked me, did I want you to connect? I've turned that off just for ease of demoing. The other thing that comes up, and this can be turned off too, is collaboration mode. So I've turned that off for you to collaborate. And before we get to the 3D thing, let's take a look at, I wanted to show off this little toolbar at the top, because this is going to be really key to the rest of what we talk about in our demo and our performance. So this is basically something that you can hover on, and it'll come up here. And what it does is it tells us about the experience. We're in something called HP3. We have 2 different codec modes. This one's a little bit higher quality, uses a little bit more bandwidth. What's important to realize here is that if I do nothing, and you can bring this up on your end too, Tom, if you want to bring the drop down.
I'm already looking at it, and I'm not using any bandwidth, and the frames per second's nothing.
So this is great from whether you're monitoring systems like in the rendering you talked about, or a teacher at the back of a classroom. I could have 18 of these sessions open, just waiting for something to come on, and all little windows on my different displays, and I'm not using hardly any bandwidth. There's 1 to 5K bits that pops up now and then just to do heartbeat, but it's really efficient, and this is what I call aspirational FPS. So normally when people talk about FPS, how fast is it running? Well, in this case, we don't care. What we care is it doesn't run any faster than it needs. So if we're only doing something that's a few frames per second, like moving the mouse around, it's only going to go up a little bit. If we're running video that's changing faster, and in fact, let me bring that up for a second. This is just a little video, and we can tell that it's probably a 30 frames per second video, because we are seeing almost getting to 30 frames per second. They may not actually be changing 30 frames per second on there, but it gets close. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And that video looks great.
Yeah, and I think that one of the things to think about too is, look at the icon here compared to the icons on your desk. You probably can't tell any difference. And
And nope.
sometimes you can just drag it over and take a look. Now, on your end, you asked about the 3D part. So let's take a look at that. So one of the things we talk about at HP is this is about right sizing. So our customers and our sales force already knows how to manipulate, or excuse me, to I was going to go ahead and manipulate the B while I talk.
Okay.
Know how to right size the system. So right now, Tom is manipulating, and you notice I've got a circle with a red bar through it. We have what's called the floor level, so it automatically switches keyboard and mouse back and forth once he stops playing. It then allows me to do it, but as I know that I can't get it, so it's like if somebody grabs your keyboard and mouse, then you can't do anything until they let go. Same idea. And we're sharing the session, so whatever we see here is what he sees here. And this application is interesting. It's a standard Windows app for 3D viewer. It tries to run aspirationally at 60 frames per second. If we don't get there, it's probably due to network conditions or different things that are going on between Tom, myself, and our servers in Fort Collins, or the workstations in our server room at Fort Collins.
Okay, so we're both seeing the exact same rendering, so you aren't seeing anything differently than I am. You aren't having more frames per second than I am. We kind of bring it down to the least common denominator for both of us, correct?
Right.
Okay.
So the other thing of interest is to look at is, we're ticking along here. This is not a high-end workstation per se. This is a Z2 Mini with a Core i7, our last generation i7, and we're hardly using any CPU, running a video and running this little 3D app. And we can also see what we're doing with the GPU. In this case, the 3D is related to the B, and the video decode is related to the playback. And I'll show you why that's important to mention in a second. But Tom, on your end, do you have one-to-one clicked, or do you have this pixel scaling mode clicked?
I have one-to-one clicked now.
Why don't you go ahead and click the scaling mode?
Well, yep, it fills up the entire monitor there.
Or you can make it smaller. But what's interesting, it didn't affect me, right? It didn't affect me, right? So we're actually doing pixel scaling. This is really key for rendering or other applications. When you drop in and out of these sessions, you can change setup to match displays, whether it's, match the sender to what I have or match me to the sender. Either way, somebody's going through a context change. And a lot of times things crash, especially the more complex they are. So what we have is the screen scaling option, and I'll show you what that looks like on my end for what we're sharing, is I can scale this down. I'm going to just knock those guys down. And basically you end up with this ability, just like a high-end Blu-ray player, where you can scale it as small. I mean, that's tiny, but if I could click on it, maybe I can. Yep, see, it's an actual Windows session. I can't use it very well, but luckily it's not an issue. So what's critical about this is I'm actually sharing 4K worth of pixels. So this is a 4K display that we're sharing into the environment for this video. So this is what it would actually look like if I was doing that one mode, Tom, you started out with. It'd take up 1/4 of the screen because 1080p is 1/4 of 4K resolution wise. But obviously go ahead.
Is it using the GPU on the client as well as the sender?
Correct. When we're doing the pixel scaling, we're using pixel shaders within the AMD, Intel, or NVIDIA hardware, that whatever happens to be with your local system, to do the scaling up and down. And it's really lightweight. You can do the same kind of task manager stuff if you want to see what we're doing, but it's really designed to be lightweight. And in these cases where you're connecting remotely, you're typically not doing anything that's much CPU or GPU intensive locally because you're in the remote session.
That's why I don't hear my GPU humming away here, right?
Right, exactly. And, this is what it would look like by going full screen. One of the cool things here is I've got 2 taskbars. Hint, make them different colors. If you don't, it's madness. But, this is my local system. This is my remote system. But if I wanted to have the completely same as a remote system, or same as being there, and that's really what it is all about, same as being there, I went full screen, and it covered up my monitor. So as far as I'm concerned, this is just my local system at 4K. I can't tell the difference even though it's 1080p scaled up.
Yeah. Hey, something else, can you talk about something else I noticed when I was doing the review is using your compression algorithm. I mean, I got like a 90% reduction in bandwidth.
Right. And I think, here we're seeing a little bit more. I'm trying to wiggle it. Let me make this really big and ugly. But let's see here. Trying to get it up a little bit higher. But, looking at this, why don't you go ahead and disconnect for a minute, Tom?
Okay.
And I'll see if I can't crank this up.
There we go.
All right. So I'm going to crank this up, and I'm going to increase my quality, just as an example, up to, near 100%. Now you'll see, oh my goodness, we're up at 50 megabits, right? So I've really, I've really high quality.
We went 5 times the bandwidth consumption, right?
Right, but let's say that it's really important to me to be at this high quality, but I can't handle this kind of bandwidth into my house, or I can't handle it through my VPN. So what we have the ability here for is what we call ABC, Advanced Video Compression. And that is something that we use with a video card. So whether it's a GeForce or a Quadro, it will work with that. And let me show you what that looks like real quick. We'll have you connect back in, because we should still have that same shared experience. In fact, it'll even be better. So I'm going to enable that here on my end, and that will force it to enable on your end. And I'll put this back down to about 60, because that's where we were. And I'll move it back up once we're in session. But NHP velocity, before I forget, is sort of something that it uses striping of the information that is sent back and forth. That helps over wide area networks from home, those type of things, to improve the user experience and help dealing with high latency environments, like you're going to have connecting. So I'm going to connect back in.
So just real quick, how long has this been around?
Well, since in its current iteration that we call Remote Boost, March. Before that, it was HP Remote Graphics Software, and under a couple different names, and that's been around since about 2003, 2004.
Yeah, I was going to say you're one of the longest players in this field. I mean, you guys have been around forever.
Right, and we just haven't. It's really been dedicated toward our enterprise customers and developing it with folks like DreamWorks and others who really had this specific need. We had just started to productize it about a year and a half ago, a little bit better, and then as we talked before, we happened to launch right at the start of COVID for something we planned last summer on the launch date.
Wait, you planned COVID last summer?
No,
There's conspiracy theory going on here.
Boy, that would be a really amazing task. We'll leave that alone. But yeah, specific to the ZCentral software, which had nothing to do with COVID. Why don't you go ahead and connect back in?
Okay. And do I have to be an Active Directory user? Can I be a local user?
You could be a local user. Just for administration purposes, we do suggest that that's
that'd be.
They do it that way.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so how many frames per second are you getting now?
I am getting 40, and yep.
It fluctuates, but great. That's what I'm getting. And that's because our bandwidth has gone down. So we were in 10 to 12. Now we're at 3 to 4. And it does vary on what the workload is. So if I crank this up, and I'll go back up here to, insane. So you can now see that where we were at 50 megabytes, we are now at about 18. Tom, go ahead and log back in. Let's get Tom back in here in collaboration. Oh, there he is. Look at that. I'll give you access rights. So go ahead as soon as you are fully logged in and move the bees so we know you're here.
Oh, look at that. Little bee is moving. Yeah.
Right. So you'll notice that we dropped down in bandwidth. We didn't drop down in frames per second, but we did drop down in bandwidth usage. Can you guess why?
I can't, because to my untrained eyes, the quality looks just as good as before. When we were consuming 10 times as much bandwidth.
Your quality session is probably a little bit lower than mine, the slider. So what happens, the slider actually adjusts the performance for both of us. So you would have the option at this point to increase yours if you wanted to up to 100. But don't worry about that for now. We'll go ahead and drop this down a little bit. But that's another thing that kind of limits it, is somebody else connects with it. It still works at the lesser system, but it's kind of cool because it makes it easy for people, when we're doing the collaboration mode, for everybody to connect and have a great experience. one of the things I wanted to point down here, the CPU utilization is actually less now. And you can tell we're using our encode part. So now we have our video playing, which is our video decode. We have our little B here moving, which is our 3D. And we have our encode, which is us actually using and AVC. So the general rule, it's about 25 to 1 on HP3, and this is 225 to 1. So to your point about the bandwidth reduction, this is why you see that. So what's really cool is if I take, and this will, if we were on some really bad connections, okay, I'm going to lower this down to about 40, which will also lower your experience. But what's cool is now, we're at this 4 megabits. So if you had a 10 megabit per second VPN, which, older companies do, they are trying to get, be kept mindful of what they have. This gets you in to this frame rate that most people are happy with 30 frames per second at a very low bandwidth. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it really does, and I have mixed thoughts about collaboration.
Well, here, let me ask.
not saying not about your software, but just about having. I can imagine a M&E guy with everyone.
Well, yeah. So that's an interesting question.
Worth.
I mean, you're showing a great example of you and Tom working together on this B while also watching a video and doing some other stuff. Does this support multiple users? I'm not exactly sure what those use cases would look like. And to Tom's point, some poor creative guy trying to draw a bee and has 12 people showing him what color the stripe should be. It may not be optimal, but what is the upward limit, Cliff, on the collaboration tools?
Sure, go ahead and play with some of the themes, Tom, while I answer that question. So really, it's a practicality based on your network, right? So we are really beholding to whatever you have set up. So if you had the best network in the world, you're getting to, and then everybody was close together, you're getting to, whatever you need, probably in the 20s to 30s. Where you're looking at real world, it really depends on each individual user's network connection. So typically somewhere between 3 and 5, depending on network conditions, are reasonable. Again, it's not designed for this like a Skype or a Zoom, but it is designed specifically as we have work product to get out that we're going to get paid for, and I need high quality stuff. Now, one of the things I want to do here, I just want to point out, well, Tom's been doing all this. We haven't gone above 1 megabit. And this has been really exciting to some people because they do live out very far away, or they are connecting through their cell phones. And while this isn't something that artists would want to deal with, or other, people who are very visually orientated, it works great for B-roll, it works great for architecture and different things like that. Let me grab control again just for a second.
Yeah,
and
so I was going to say, one of the collaboration things, I know there's leakage when new movies or trailers get kind of put out. So this is a way that you can kind of control that, right? Say, I'm going to show you guys this, but yeah.
Right, and absolutely. So I have full confidence. You can't do anything here to get information off the system. There's no file transfer in the normal sense. There's some things we can do to completely disable USB drives. We also have the ability to deal with smart cards, like if you had a secure ID to log in. And it's really about helping companies protect their assets. We're just fully encrypted, moving pixels and keyboard commands or human interfaces devices like the Wacom we mentioned back and forth, and having this great experience.
Yeah, and then if you're using a VDI client, I know you guys have some controls that you can put around there to prevents them from plugging USB devices in, so they can't capture things that way or infect the system that way. Yeah.
And we're very much open to how customers want to use this in the future. A lot of this is what I would call admin class, in the sense, as you found out from the user experience, if you just install the receiver and somebody tells you what to connect to, that's it. There's really not anything else. And if you're using our Connect product, which is its purpose, is I got you to install the receiver, which is like the heavy lifting, and most people can install software now. And then I sent you this URL, you connected, and we're done. I mean, I wasn't worried after I got a receiver, because then I knew everything else was automatic. You wouldn't have a problem. And that's what we need today, because your artist, your professional, your engineer, they don't want to learn how to use the software, how to do this, how to do that, how do I start the virtual session. They just want to work.
Yeah, like you said at the beginning of this, 20 hours people were converted over from going into the office to working at home.
The machines are in place, in this case, So when they do have the chance to go back in the office, it's the same environment with their displays and everything else. And of course, we support multiple displays and whatever, whatever one would expect remote, we support that.
Oh yeah, I didn't even think about, now we're getting to the point where maybe return to work is kind of the new buzzword, and how are we going to accomplish this? And this is like a no-brainer. You just show up with your with whatever, and you're back in the office.
Well, you're optimized your physical space too, right? Because now you're talking about just plopping down anywhere, and if your computers are in the data center, I mean, physically now you've got a more adaptable floor plan for an unpredictable workforce.
Yeah, right. So if you got to leave every other cubicle empty, so what? Doesn't matter, right?
Right.
Plus, you didn't have to, as an IT person, you didn't have to figure out who went one cubicle. It makes a dream of hoteling and work high-end workflow, or not just I'm working on my laptop one display. Whatever you have 20 engineers who will need all 3 displays. Great, you put up 10 hoteling stations, and they're all going to have the right experience connecting to that, and you didn't have to do anything. They just check in, log in, connect, work on campus. Oh, they had to go home. Well, they had the 2 displays at home too, same setup, and it works exactly the same. No transition. They just had to log back in.
All right.
And in fact, they could leave it logged in at work and go home and access. Sorry about that.
No, that's quite all right. I mean, I know this is the hard part, because I know as a product guy, you get excited about all these things, and rightfully so. Yep. Because as we've seen, as Tom's seen, as we talked about in the paper, we had these systems set up in our lab, which is right next to me, and Tom's hitting them from Portland, and Vince is hitting them from New York area. And then we've got local traffic here, and we've got a lot going on. And to Tom's point, especially from the end user experience, there's nothing to it. So this is a great technical walkthrough for IT admins or anyone that's trying to figure out this problem in their own organization, what you can do with HPZ, with HP, ZCentral Remote Boost. A lot of great tools. We'll put, like I said, links to all of those in the description, and have that ready for you to check out. Any final thoughts, Tom?
Not really. I think we did a really good job covering all the kind of cool stuff and how simple it is to use. And I think in the podcast I mentioned that we keep talking about this is the year of VDI. Probably came close to it this year, but like I said, standing up the infrastructure for the virtual machines, I think this is the year of HDI, because you can just use what you got and be rocking and rolling and creating content.
All right, and Cliff, what do you want to close out with here?
Just my thanks for all the work you guys have put into this, and taking a detailed look at the technology, and Tom for understanding it so well as you do, and providing the time for all this. It's beneficial for a way to get the word out, and also helps just in general this notion of work from home. Whether you use this solution, which I think is a great one, or another one, it's kind of where we're at right now. I don't know what the next steps hold, but I know we're going to be there trying to do the best we can for our customers and anybody else who needs help.
Well, I appreciate you guys joining in today. I don't like to compliment Tom all that much, but he is a great thought leader in this space of remote work. So I'm glad Tom was able to partner with us. Cliff, thanks for the technical walkthrough. I know the followers on YouTube will really enjoy being able to dive into those technical details. And for now, like I said, the links are in the description. Check out the Z portfolio. The new rack unit that comes out in October looks really, really sweet. 42 of those in a traditional data center rack, with access to all the corporate governance for data and the shared storage and everything else you've got going on, is a really neat value proposition to be able to enable a remote workforce to have access to systems like that. But you don't have to have the new latest gear. All the stuff in the pile here works too, and these are things that we've had around the office and what we used in our implementation of it. Anyway, great application. Definitely check it out, and again, see all the links in the description. Thanks for tuning in. Bye-bye.